underway. So it looks like we've loaded in, and let's check the generation first of all, because one thing I always like to check when we open up like this is whether either side gets kind of a retracted spawn. And I'd have to say, actually, this time around, these spawns look fairly even. The tree lines are pretty comparable. You haven't got anyone pushed up hard against the back wall. So we could get quite a kind of interesting, kind of aggressive tempo setting type game instead of someone just retracting and playing the role of the turtle.
Indeed, up north is Deimos playing as the English in blue, and down south we have DauT playing as the Delhi in red. Looking at the bases, as you said, the wood lines are quite evenly distributed, although Deimos' one are both at the front, which could be a little concerning against a ton of aggression from the Delhi should that happen. But luckily for him, his gold mine is at the back, so if he wants to stay on gold, grab those blacksmith upgrades, it's very unlikely that DauT can push him away from there early on.
I'd say one of the frustrating things about playing England on Dry Arabia is when your opponent gets these kind of clustered close tree generations, mainly depending on where the other ingredients to their economy are, right? In this situation, I actually think this is pretty good for Deimos aggressively, because usually your concern is when you have these two tree lines, is there a gold or a food anywhere like on the other side? Because usually one of the big players against England is because they go in hard and fast, but they're very slow at moving. Just simply palisade walling between the two wood points actually doubles the amount of time it takes them to move to the other side of your base and poke your economy. Unfortunately for DauT in this game, if you look, you can see both his food and his gold. He can't wall to protect them. So it could be very easy for Deimos to kind of become the tempo setter and continuously snipe and keep DauT pressured away from valuable resources, aka the berries and the gold.
I agree with that. On the other hand, of course, English very heavily focused on the longbows, which gives a window for the Delhi to utilize a horseman archer composition. So DauT definitely has his tools to respond to that. But as you said, it depends on how much aggression Deimos is able to put up right at the beginning. Looks like both players are only operating with one scout. DauT pretty successful finding sheep, not so much success for Deimos, so slight advantage for DauT in that department. And of course, with the Delhi, you always focus on your berries at the beginning, but extra sheep is always welcome.
Yeah, so one interesting thing that I like to highlight when the game first came out, and I think it rings true even now with Delhi and Abbasids, is that you should have always been playing towards like the mill on the berry bush early, just to get the risky eco if you were going to retract, right? Because the whole concept here is those sheep are now your fallback plan, right? Uh, they're your eggs nested nicely in a hidden place. Essentially, if you ever get pressured by these longbows, you can just fall back under the TC and harvest safely. I would say actually the interesting part about this matchup is the sheep fact that doesn't matter as much as it does in other Civ on Civs, right? Because one of the cool things is on either side, like we said, the Delhi, they do have the power of these berry bushes. So if they miss out on sheep, whoop-de-doo. And then, of course, for England, something we've seen is actually it's quite feasible to instantly just go into farms if you want to, if you're really that pushed, and only need one or two sheep to sustain you until you have those farms online due to the 50% discount that England get.
Indeed, we have the Council Hall coming in for Deimos as one would expect, and on the other side, Dome of the Faith coming in. And efficient production is what DauT starts with as his first upgrade. He actually built that mosque quite early on, so he's going to finish with efficient production by the time he gets to Feudal Age, so he can start pumping out horsemen right at the beginning. And on the other side, you see a barracks coming out already for Deimos, of course, because he knows that the horseman is an option for Delhi, so he needs to be prepared for that right after hitting Feudal Age.
Yeah, an interesting thing to highlight here is how England players have become a lot more kind of defensive in their opening, I'd say. Like, not only the racks, but also the fact that you go for racks, it means you don't rush this villager over to drop an outpost early, right? If you just talk about even 2 weeks ago, it was quite common to see these England players instantly move out with one, possibly two villagers, start up the outpost in prep to coincide with the timing that you completed your council hall. But now, just too much of a risk. And as you said, because you're up against Delhi, it's a high probability you're going to be facing horsemen, so you just be running straight towards your own death.
English having the free hardened spearman upgrade also helps, of course, because not only do they not need to make that upgrade happen on their barracks, so they have more time to spend making spearmen, they also don't have to spend gold on it, so they can pull their villagers away from gold a lot earlier, and that's exactly what we're seeing from Deimos. He is entirely committed towards food and wood, which is a sign that he won't be using blacksmith upgrades early on, and he would just be flooding out spears and archers.
Interesting things to going to be seeing if he tries to drop any like mid point outposts. Something I've seen England players do to kind of drag games later if they feel confident about the matchup is they actually will kind of aggressively wall these open maps themselves and just look to control with mid outposts as opposed to those hyper aggressive outposts that we've been seeing in previous patches. But we'll see. He's already moving out the spears and the archers, and it doesn't look like the military presence has been prepped just yet. DauT now dropping the stable. And we'll look to get the first horseman out. Interesting to see if he'll hide them in the TC. I've noticed a lot of players kind of do this where they just try and hold their cards close to their chest, right? They don't reveal how big their military force is until their opponent gets closer. But he might have to react sooner considering his berry bushes on the front.
And the bigger concern for him is that there is 2 spearmen accompanying those archers, so horsemen by themselves won't be enough, and you see there is no archer component to him, so he's adding the blacksmith right away, and he's now empowering that stable, but 2 spearmen alone could be enough to just wipe out the horsemen. As you see, the berries are already being forced away here by Deimos.
Yeah, and I think that came down to DauT's vision as well. The scout's there now, but I don't think he was in position before. So by the time he spotted these spears, he'd already committed to the blacksmiths. That's definitely going to slow down his timing and might allow Deimos to get a foothold here. And because he's already been forced off those berry bushes, like we said, those sheep now do come into the equation. They're handy, but they are inferior, vastly inferior now for the Delian compared to those berry bushes.
Reaction is there for DauT. He's going to start adjusting to archers, but as you see, he's a little low on wood. As you said, he committed to that blacksmith early, and that's going to be quite a lot of wood spent, so he wasn't ready to start making archers, and it's going to take some time for him to do that. And while that's happening, he's off from the berries, as you said, and because of that, his food eco is not as powerful as it could possibly be. And with the forward tower there for Deimos, it would be very difficult for DauT to get it back.
Oh, yeah. And it's going to cover 2 berry bushes. And it's interesting you mentioned like the knock-on effect, right? That food factor, because it means he can't easily afford the horsemen and the archers now because he's not in the berry bushes. But I like this. DauT wraps around the back, moves the horsemen in to cut off reinforcements. If he finds even spearmen one by one, he can take reasonable trades. But now, more importantly, he can stop this slow trickle-in of reinforcements for Deimos.
Absolutely. Just 3 horsemen over there cutting off a couple of reinforcements is immensely valuable. It also gives a window for DauT to potentially charge in and get some villager kills on the Vudik of the opponent, but now he has to be careful running towards that tower.
Oh my. And more running towards those spears, more importantly. Loses one of the horsemen in the blink of an eye. And I guess it's actually tough for him to try and raid into England's economy as well, because I think something that we often forget, because we're so focused on the Lombos, the rush factor of England, is their defensive elements. The double arrow fire from the TC makes it very hard for even these horsemen to dive in, even after they got buffed on their ranged armor up by 1 all ages.
Looks like Deimos wants to place a second tower over here. That villager is just waiting for the resources to pile up. That would definitely be intriguing, because now you would have your longbows positioned around the berries, and when you position your forces around those berries, it's also a lot more difficult for the horsemen to get a good surround on them, so it would be a great position to hold. And the big problem here for DauT is that he will soon have to break out of his base because he's running out of sheep, but now he's got a fairly sizable force of archers and horsemen, and we've talked about this. Delhi is able to reinforce their army so effectively, and DauT is almost done with the range defense upgrade as well, so he's playing this one patiently and it's paying off.
Well, look what he's doing. Look what he's on the west side. Look what he's sneaking out to. This is risky, but he's going to drop an outpost and look to get back on the berries on the west side here. Deimos hasn't spotted this at all yet, and in fact won't be likely to see it. And is already suffering due to the generation here. This is one of the kind of troublesome issues you have as England. We talked about these tree lines, right? You want to wiggle round, but you're just in range of that TC, so it's hard for him to push through. Now, luckily for DauT, he didn't go west and go wider, which is what most England players would have done. And had he done, he would have spotted this expansion and shut it down before it actually bared fruit.
Horseman now launching counterattack, but DauT's gotta be careful because there's a lot of forces over here for Deimos. Spearmen ready to fight, and the archers are lagging behind a tiny bit here for DauT. He is in a troublesome spot.
Yeah, so positioning-wise, this looks worrying. He's about to become the meat and the sandwich if he's not careful. Remember, Deimos was holding back forces at his base as well. So Lombos will poke and prod them towards the reinforcements from the north, but it looks like they can easily just back away here. Now remember, these archers do move quicker than Lombos, so it's actually impossible for them to chase them down right now. It looks like DauT will easily be able to sidestep this gank attempt coming out from Deimos.
And it's a clever move from DauT that while he's pulling the forces of the opponent to the left, he's taking the Sacred Sat on the right. So slowly but surely, DauT is recovering from this, and as you said, he's got a completely untouched food eco on the left side on the berries, and that's immensely helpful. And the extra mobility he has is starting to pay off. The archers moving faster than the longbows, and the horsemen moving faster than any other unit from the opponent. And for Deimos, he still doesn't have a blacksmith for the siege upgrade, so he can't just ram push DauT, force him to defend.
No, he is getting on the stone right now, just a little bit at a time. I wonder if that's just to upgrade the outpost. I think he's just, yeah, he's continuing the outpost crawl here. And DauT tries to address it, but unable to do so. But what he might be able to do is raid. He's actually sneaking to Deimos' base right now from the east side. And there's a lot of exposed economy here. And Deimos, he might seem too late. Horsemen are in with the charge. Archers move onto the wood line. Looking to snipe out one or two of these villies, but they're not able to find more. Only getting, it looks like one, maybe two in the end, but with the Lombos there and the TC as well, forced out back. In the meantime, pressure ramps up as the dive comes out. Deimos, I think he got distracted there. He ran his spearman underneath the TC. Oh no. That is not a good sign. I think that was 5, maybe 6 of his spearmen just being picked off as it looked like they got auto-attacked underneath the town center.
Indeed, as he was distracted, as he was pulling his villagers back to the town center, his spearmen just started rushing forward, and that could be devastating because now he doesn't have enough spearmen to fight against a large amount of horsemen. And on the other side, his food eco is in jeopardy. He ran out of sheep underneath his town center, he's off from the berries, and he just has no additional food income. He doesn't have the wood to set up that farming eco, and because of that, his food income is now absolutely collapsed.
No, and I love this from DauT. DauT is not coming back to ever address this force in his base. He understands that actually Deimos is in for a penny, in for a pound. If he tries to fall back to his side of the map to defend his base, it's going to take him what's going to feel like a million years. Like, if you just hover over the Longbowmen right now and watch them run, it's like watching an old man cross the road, right? Like, it's going to take a while, and eventually he's probably going to get hit by either a car or a horse in this situation, and probably a horse just trying to run all the way back there. That measly 1.12 movement speed is what makes England more balanced, right? It's the kind of check for the early game presence, and it's definitely being manipulated effectively by DauT here.
Looks like Deimos had a forward villager coming in, and that was intercepted by the archers. And at this point, Deimos is just so heavy on the food department, but he's very far from setting up any reasonable food eco for himself, which means that he can't produce spearmen, he can't produce longbows, and DauT is slowly taking over in army. He's already at 47 as compared to 30. Many of those numbers consisting of horsemen, which are just currently the most powerful unit on the battlefield.
Yeah, and Deimos, this is all in. He's building the battering rams right now. I mean, he hasn't even tried to transition to farms. He's finally doing that, but that's going to leave him weak. And I'm pretty sure DauT spotted all this. He got the scouts kind of wrapping around. He got some kind of inkling that this wasn't being built up quick enough. And now when he sees the rams, he's going to understand that Deimos has put himself in the timer. He needs to find impact in the next 2 minutes or it's going to be over. And the ride out, straight in. The spearmen aren't in position. They can't help. They're trying to garrison. No! Deimos! Dead much more like. It looks like he can't really go anywhere here. The amount of horsemen here, they'll be able to burst through the outpost. They don't care. With that extra ranged armor, it barely hurts. And Deimos is like, I can use this ram to kill horses, right? It's just a big spike. It's like a big spear. No, my friend, it doesn't work that way. There's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to hide. The reinforcement is going to be too late, and Deimos might lose the entirety of his forward base here. It looks like there is no way that he can repel this big of a force coming out of DauT.
Yeah, there's no way that he can do that. And the ram is gonna go down. That's a big investment going down the drain as well. The towers will be cleaned up. DauT also lost some of his numbers, but ultimately he's gonna have a much easier time replenishing those than it's gonna be for Deimos. And Deimos' army has just disappeared from the battlefield. He's down to 11, out of which 10 are garrisoned in these towers and are about to get slaughtered.
No, you know, Deimos, like, he's going to lose more of his troops, going to lose the forward front. It really feels like he was all in on the outpost cheese, right? He was looking to set up that network, and England do this very differently to other civs, but I think the critical detail is when DauT spotted out those berry bushes and denied them, Deimos was relying on that, and ever since that point in the game, he's not had the surplus resources to do absolutely anything, and now with DauT teching up into Castle Age, it just might be a game where Deimos sees that tick over and then instantly hits the GG.
He kind of has to at this point. Looking at the population, it's double for DauT at this point. And once DauT gets to Castle Age, he's going to have the Lancers as an added component. Indeed, he's adding 2 more stables. And he's also controlling 2 sacred sites. He's got the Scholars to start picking up relics with. And there's just nowhere to go at this point for Deimos. He's got his food eco set up now, but by the time it starts kicking in, it's just a little too late. And at this point, DauT's army is just gigantic. 40 versus just 5 from his opponent.
And there it is. He sees the tech up. Deimos, he looks at his base. He looks at his poor people. He wonders if there'll be a better tomorrow for them, but it will not happen today. He'll call the GG. Map 1 will be going the way of DauT.
The patience is paying off so well for DauT. Because that was all about that. Deimos actually had a very, very good start over here. He was able to deny the berries, but Then DauT just used his mobility advantage against the English, intercepted the reinforcements with the horsemen, then was able to outmaneuver his opponent and secure the berries on the left side. And from that point on, he just continued that massive army buildup. And if you look at the army graph, DauT never really took a fight before he got to like 40, 45 armies. So he really was considerate, making sure that he's not gonna take one bad fight and lose his entire army.
No, most definitely. I think the critical detail is really around that berry bush snipe. The fact that DauT like patiently scouts that out, he sees his opponent's heavy on berries, and that is something very unorthodox to England. Whenever you see an English player gathering on the berry bushes, you understand that he's actually just trying to power spike in the next 2 minutes and then try to impact into your base, right? He's not actually scaling himself. A lot of England players in this situation instead would look for a little bit later of a timing. They drop the farms. But essentially, when you go on the berries like that, what you're telling your opponent is this is an outpost rush, right? And the way that England outpost rushes is very weirdly different to a lot of these other civs. I feel like whenever we see England do outpost rushes, it's a little bit slower, but it's meant to be more kind of emphatic. Once you get in position, it fully oppresses your opponent. But DauT was wise to this, timed it perfectly. And as we mentioned in the cast, from the moment that he actually stopped the gathering on those berry bushes, it felt like Deimos was lost, right? He was a headless chicken in this game until eventually DauT decided to cook him.
And with that, now we're moving to the home map of Deimos, which is Hill and Dale. Let's check up on the civilizations, see if we already have information on there. But DauT up one game. Deimos definitely had the tools for this one, but just a couple of things sort of slipped his mind. Some things didn't work out the way he intended to, and as, for example, he wasn't able to deny DauT entirely from the berries, and ultimately those things piled up for a victory for DauT. But if the things line up appropriately, he's gonna have his window to potentially turn this around.
Yeah, so I think where Deimos really got tripped up was the mobility factor in that game when you think about it, right? It's the fact that he's playing an open map and he's playing as England, and Delhi aren't the Delhi of old. You know, you talk about the previous Delhi, yeah, they were a static civ. They relied more on castle age than anything else. They go into elephants. They don't move quickly. But that is a Delhi of yesterday. We're talking about the future Delhi, which is these horsemen, as we saw, these archers, the rapid movement out to capture the sacred sites. And England really suffers against that because unless you're willing to play a slower style and aim for that castle age and boom into Imperial type England, which is less favorable because you want to win, you want to focus on how you can win the game now, not in 20 minutes. Instead, you end up in the situation where you're almost always going to be behind. It's really interesting to watch England in this matchup because I feel like if they want to start taking games as a Civ and these players actually want to start thriving with England again, they're going to have to evolve the way they play the Civ. I think for a long time, England has been fairly, I want to say, kind of one-dimensional, right? Like outside of the Imperial age, kind of fullback plan of 40 minutes into a game, it feels like it's very predictable what England's going to do for the first 2025.
Absolutely. And the thing is that their biggest power for the last 3 months was that they can just produce longbowmen really fast. But now that people are trying to figure out the other civilizations, like for example Delhi with the scholars, or even Chinese with the supervising ability, they're realizing that there's multiple civilizations that can flood archers just as much as English. And the Delhi also have the power of getting the horsemen out really fast, have a very powerful economy. So turns out that the biggest advantage of the English is something that pretty much is there for the Delhi as well, in one way.
Most definitely. It looks like they're getting ready for game number 2. So it should just be a few minutes until we're ready to go. Of course, we have to worry about that delay. But it is going to be an HRE on HRE matchup here on Hill and Dale. Surprise, surprise. Couldn't have seen this one coming.
Yep, that's not so unexpected, and it's also one of the most snowbally type of mirrors, because really this is gonna come down to whoever can secure an extra relic over the opponent, because that is just such a gigantic amount of difference when it comes to gold income. It's interesting that Chinese has sort of fallen out of favor entirely for Hillandale. Obviously, now they have a bug where they only empower 150% instead of 200%, so
Yeah.
it's a tiny bit bugged. But about a month and a half ago, on Hillandale, you had like a 50% chance of people picking Chinese and 50% picking HRE. Now it's completely HRE sided.
No, most definitely. I think the other thing is kind of like with China, it hurts the most critical timing. Because I think people start to switch on, at least they were before the bug appeared in the game. The China's most powerful time didn't necessarily have to be this old concept of fire lancers or playing into an artillery army later on. Actually, their feudal timing is incredibly powerful. The fact that you're able to take one building and convert it into free saves you 300 wood resources, which can be surplus put into an army early on. So the fact that they don't have the ability to fully utilize that skill anymore really has set them back as a top tier civ for me. I'd say they're mid of the pack now at this point. I still think they have some potential around things such as the Palace Guard later on. But yeah, that's definitely crippled their timings a lot. HRE on the other hand, definitely getting a little bit better with the bugs being creased out, especially around the way prelate functions. One interesting thing I'm looking to see in this game, because I'm a little bit of a nerd for it time and time again, like honestly, you might as well just have me screaming efficiency, is the way that they essentially structure the early game economy, i.e., where do they place their sheep? Because one thing I've noticed is some players have already caught to this, is if you have a prelate running back and forth between your wood and your food line, you should shorten the distance to the maximum, right? Pull a sheep to the left side or the right side of your TC. So, like, when we open up this game and we look at Deimos in this situation, say he wants to go onto the wood line on the left here as the blue player. He should have his sheep on the left and the north side of his TC. So his poor old man who needs a walking stick doesn't waste time walking back and forth and losing efficiency where he could be buffing more of these villagers. But looks like we are in game after giving that detailed description, as it is going to be DauT in the red on the left, and we're going to have Deimos in the blue on the right. Both of them, of course, playing as that HRE. Will be looking towards playing towards those relics, and it looks like it's a fairly even generation when it comes to the placement of those relics.
Indeed, it seems quite fair, maybe slightly better for Deimos over here, but him being down one game, I guess the map generation gods just give him a bit of an edge over his opponent, but as I said, it's a rather close matchup. One of the more interesting things to look at, though, is going to be gold mine positions, because not only does Deimos have one large gold mine on top of his hill, he also has one in front, whereas for DauT, he has to move out a lot more to secure an additional gold mine. In fact, DauT's only got one big gold mine close to his hill in the Dale area. This could be a factor if the game goes very long, but with HRE mirrors, that's not usually the case. So in the rare occurrence of that happening, DauT could have issues controlling gold.
One cool thing to highlight of this generation, though, like although DauT gets less gold, it is more efficiently placed, right? Where essentially it's going to take him less time to move new villages out and also to move from depleted gold lines to new ones. Whereas when we look at Deimos kind of has this kind of weird Benny Hills moment going on where he's going to have to run from one side of his base to the other to get a gold vein and then one side to the other side to get a gold vein sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see, like, efficiency wise, whether DauT's able to spot and manipulate that advantage in the first 20 minutes, or if it is going to fall back to that surplus resource you talked about.
Looks like both players are just operating with one scout, not something that you commonly see from HRE on this map. You usually add the second scout here simply because you want to grab some extra sheep. Obviously, the prelate boosting your eco is very effective when you have the sheep nearby at the beginning, so you're trying to get as many sheep as you can possibly have. You'll probably take your hunt with an extra mill or potentially professional scouts, but ultimately, having some extra sheep for the HR is always a nice thing to have, because you can have a very efficient food eco with the prelates boosting it.
And you go through them quickly. Something that we see a lot with these civs, right? We talk about the idea of like fabricating new resources, right? Like China, for example, we talked about. They have a supervisor oversee a building, and they essentially convert your existing resources in that area into an extra 20%, right? Same with like Rus with the Wooden Fortresses. They give you 20% additional drop off. The thing about the HRE is they have this ridiculously powerful Holy Inspiration that buffs you to gather 40% quicker, but it doesn't give you 40% more resources in the area, right? So if anything, you dry up quicker. So you have to actually keep ample resources pushing into your eco area so that you're able to actually sustain your output. So the fact that he's already draining through these sheep, luckily for him, because the deer spawn so quickly, will tide him over. But it's something to definitely keep in mind when we talk about things like the gold veins, is you're going to pick them apart much quicker than other civs would, and it means you're probably going to have to move out to more dangerous areas of the map much sooner than other civs would have to.
The Archon Chapel is coming in for both sides over here. Deimos is only building it with 2 wheels. DauT is building that up with 6. So DauT is rushing that Feudal Age quite heavily. Both players will have an Archon Chapel that's going to boost their food, wood, and gold income as well. For DauT, he even has the mill in its influence radius, so it's actually the perfect Archon Chapel. Not so lucky for Deimos. He's only going to have his sheep villagers covered by it, but he's going to have to move out for the hunt. Oftentimes when this happens, he would just add a second prelate and make a mill there and use that prelate to boost that food eco. So not the end of the world, but slightly more efficiency here for DauT.
Yeah, this is one of those frustrating things that I kind of don't like about Age of Empires, right? Like, you get some really cool generations, but when you talk about a competitive scene and then people playing mirror matchups, it can be really sucky when small details like the map seed or what should be small details can really be definitive. Because I think for the HRE matchup, this is a very important detail. If you can get the Holy Trinity of food, gold, and wood in the Influence Yark and Chapel, it boosts your economy so much further than your opponent. By like in this case, in this matchup, I'd say like DauT for the next 5-6 minutes should be about 20-25% more efficient at least than his opponent, just because he'll be able to reach the threshold of like 10 plus villages for each prelate, and then he'll be able to essentially bulk up to, I'd say, about 30 villages underneath the influence of this chapel before he gets a big enough economy that he moves outside of it.
Absolutely. And since he already has the Aachen Chapel up, all of his villagers are boosted, whereas on the other side, obviously Deimos not having the Aachen Chapel up means that many of the villagers are not boosted just yet, the wood gatherers, and that's also going to decrease his efficiency. And strictly speaking, DauT even has the stone in the influence radius of that Aachen Chapel. Not something that's going to be a factor early on, but this is really the perfect Aachen Chapel for DauT.
Yeah, it's kind of disgusting to look at when you think about it. That definitely doesn't feel fair to Deimos right now. I mean, we talked about the map gods being reasonable with the relic generation, but it seems like they wanted to balance out their decision when it came to everything else. Remember, folks, Deimos is currently one game down, DauT one away from winning, and with an opening like this, with the way DauT played last game as well, understanding patience and when he can pressure, it could be a case of Deimos just being slapped out quickly unless he tries to make a move soon. And my concern is that DauT is already being into the punchline. Stable's already going down for him. Deimos is just completely non-present militarily. He's just rushing castle as fast as possible. And remember, one weakness of doing this compared to what DauT is doing, it means that when you do arrive in castle, if you run your fragile prelates out to gather up these relics, they're not going to have anyone to protect them. They can be sniped out very easily. And that's something that DauT is going to be prepped to not only defend his own prelates, but also snipe out yours because he already has a stable down.
Absolutely. And the thing is that, of course, you can say that, hey, I'm gonna get to Castle Age, I'm gonna make some knights, but when you get to Castle Age, the moment you get there, you want to start picking up relics. So you can't just get to Castle Age, make a stable, start making knights, and then move out with your prelates, because that's already too late. So what DauT is doing is indeed a little more effective. He's gonna have some presence on the map. Looks like he's not popping out any horsemen just yet. He probably wants to click up to Castle Age first. He's adding an extra plot now to start moving out towards the relics. Whereas on the other side, as you see, the Regnitz Cathedral is being rushed up by no less than 16 villagers. So really, Deimos is all in going into that castle age as fast as possible.
And I think the reason that DauT didn't go for Horseman in the end is that scout. That scout actually moved in. I think he got eyeballs on what was happening. So he kind of understood that Deimos didn't even have any military presence whatsoever. And then he might even got a glimpse of this many workers. I mean, that is the ludicrous amount of workers to put on this at this stage. Usually this is the way HRE plays, though. When you talk about these mirror matchups, it's literally a race. Simply a race of who can get up first. Because even one relic advantage makes a huge difference. Remember, folks, this cathedral buffs up the generation of gold every minute for you by an extra 200%, meaning you get 300 gold per minute for each relic banked inside of this cathedral.
Indeed, you do. And that basically would translate to a free relic difference between other civilizations. So if this was, let's say, an English mirror, 300 gold per minute is 3 relics worth of difference. So that's a considerable amount of gold for the rest of the game, as you already see the horsemen pop out for DauT. Ragnitz Cathedral is already in for Deimos, but as you said, with the horsemen soon coming onto the battlefield, it's going to be difficult for Deimos to secure those relics. He will get one because the scout won't be able to take down the prelate, but after that, you're going to have DauT's prelates moving out now. Prelate speed also was increased in the recent patch, so it takes a little less time to get those relics, and that could be helpful when you have scouts or even horsemen chasing your prelates.
Yeah, that's very true. And Deimos already securing two of them, but DauT, I like the shifts out for the central relic on the south side. Wants to get the harder to reach one, but looks like Deimos is ahead of him. Look what he's done. He snatched it up already. And the horseman was distracted by the scout the entire time. The prelate is going to realize he's got empty hands as he arrives where the relic once was. And it's looking like it may very easily may be Deimos getting 3 of these relics, which would be a huge booster. You mentioned it as like 3 relics for the price of 1 for the HRE, right? Another cool way to think of it is, let's say we provide for a standard villager not being buffed by Holy Inspiration, let's say a villager gathers around 40 of a resource a minute, right? So if I'm getting 300 gold, then I essentially have like 6 or 7 villages worth of gold for free, passively being generated, right? So you have to kind of math that in your head, right? Maths is hard. I don't like doing it. But when you do think about the maths of it, economically, it's a huge power booster to your economy because you're essentially just having to look at the eco count on both sides and then add in those additional villages for each relic being slapped in here.
DauT is gonna be able to yoink a villager away here from Deimos. Deimos now going for the knights, and as you said, one of the things that was missing there for DauT is the horseman numbers. He was slower to castlage, but he only had like one horseman on the battlefield, so he really wasn't able to snipe prelates. And that's part of the reason why Deimos is now on 3. It looks like we will have 2 stables coming in for him. Other side, we will have Market come up for DauT early on. He added a second stable and then he cancelled it. So now Deimos is going to have his window when it comes to knight numbers and should be able to deny the sacred sites that DauT is capping right now.
So this is interesting, actually. DauT is trying to play heavily into gold to just manipulate the economy and then push into food hard, right, through trade. Because when you look at his food eco right now, it says he's got 17 people on him, but if you have a look at what those 17 people are gathering, or most of them gathering from, they're running out, right? The carcass is almost dry. The sheep are all but gone. He's going to have a hard transition point. It might even be that he's just planning to trade gold for wood to be able to prep himself for a hard push into farmlands.
In the middle, though, there is a big fight being won by DauT over here. He's going to yoink a prelate, and a knight as well was also taken down previously. So while he's behind in terms of relic numbers, we also have to consider that he's got 2 sacred sites and he's capturing a third one. So that is an extra 300 gold per minute. And if you look at the gold income per minute, it's actually better for DauT. And if you look at his resources, that is a fast Imperial with the Palace of Swabia coming in for our red player.
Holy mother of cheddar, yes, that is. It's already being built on the fort as well, so it'll be a nice kind of fallback point around the choke point for him with the Palace of Swabia. And I don't think the Deimos is aware of this at all. He's just building more knights, he's casually walling. Look what he's doing, he's just walling himself in. He's getting warm for the winter. The problem is it's going to be a long winter. When you look at his resources, because he keeps pushing out this many knights, all he has is surplus gold and nothing else. He'll finally drop the marketplace, but he's a long way away from his Imperial timing. And it means that DauT is going to be dominant for the next few minutes.
And part of the reason why he's so far away is because he doesn't have the food. And he's just now starting to take the hunt. That's the difference between DauT's eco and his eco. DauT already depleted his hunt, boosted by the Aachen Chapel. Whereas on the other side, you just don't have that. Wheelbarrow was also missing the whole time for Deimos, whereas you had that for DauT. So DauT really just wanted to secure those relics as much as he could, but his ultimate goal is this fast Imperial, and he's going to nail that in 11:30.
That's going to be a beauty. And he still has some knights to defend himself. So Deimos, until he sees that tick up, wouldn't have been aware this was happening. He'd try to move out now, but DauT might be able to prep in time. And remember, because you have this Palace of Swabia up, you now have cannon fodder. You don't care if these villagers start getting picked off by knights. It's kind of irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, and Deimos is still not even close to ready to start his own tech up. The only thing he can do right now is decap these sacred sites and try to stem the bleeding, because DauT is going to easily cruise through to his military timing without any pressure applied to him. The only thing that Deimos can do right now is try to strip away some of those additional resources he's getting elsewhere on the map.
Absolutely. Of course, he can also try securing the sacred sites just so that he's got a slightly better gold income. He's not far away from Imp, but he needs to start buying food over here in order to get up. And also, since DauT was buying food, the base price of food is much higher for our blue player than it is for our red player. So it would take 200 gold to buy 100 food here for Deimos as compared to what it was for DauT, which is much lower.
That's pretty crippling in the situation. You can see how he's suffering as well. So late into that hunt, as you were talking about. Now a fight going on with the Knights. No animation cancelling around these parts. Nope, just a straight number game. A number game that will favor DauT here as it will chase Deimos away. And we'll probably look to recap these sacred sites. And now you need to be careful. Deimos in a fragile state where he can't really afford to replace any military units lost because he needs that Imperial Age timing. But DauT is now going to continue to snowball and just amass more troops to push in. And it is going to leave Deimos in a very fragile state.
And he is still not going up to Imperial. Every second that he's delayed is just a massive advantage for DauT at this point, because DauT can just pop out villagers so fast from that Palace of Swabia. He's at 58 as opposed to 41, so already a 17 villagers lead. And it really doesn't matter for Deimos that he's got one extra relic when DauT's got the sacred sites and DauT's got the villager advantage. Imperial Age on the way right now for Deimos.
It's an even bigger lead, though. Look what just got completed by DauT. These are elite knights now. Heavy hitters. The Swole boys are ready to fight. And these small blue knights look irrelevant in comparison on the health, on the damage, on everything. And these palisades will not hold the knights out for long. Although you might buy enough time for the tech up, DauT in a position where as soon as he burns this down and sees that tech up, he might just rush in deeper. Deimos has to find a way to maybe get some rush cycling going, but he's a little bit too hesitant. He's paranoid. He understands that right now he can't afford to push out new knights, so he needs to prep a defense. He's going to fall back, drop the racks, and look to get some spearmen out. But you have to question if this will be quick enough, because remember, when he gets to those spearmen, they're not going to be upgraded. They're going to be pretty flimsy against elite knights at this stage in the game.
Absolutely, they will have absolutely no upgrades, and those are elite knights out there. DauT could also bring in some bombards as well to start taking down buildings, but as you said, this is the window for DauT to strike. He sees that Deimos is an Imperial, so he needs to wipe out that army of Castle Age Knights with his elites before the upgrades come in for Deimos.
And here he goes, riding in. He's going to force the engagement because he didn't want to surrender over his economy, and it means that this is going to favor DauT, as these are still just normie knights. However, the assistance of the TC is making a small difference. Spearmen starting to come out, but they are weak, and more elite knights are arriving. Deimos repelling DauT away for the moment, but won't be able to emphatically push him out of his base. He'll easily linger around and look to wrap around if you ever back off. More spears coming out. Poke's doing some decent damage. It looks like because the upgrade to harden now, DauT is going to back away for the moment, but he's gained a lot of ground. Deimos is definitely up against the ropes. And with the turnaround, he baits him out outside of range of the TC, and he needs to retreat, which means he's going to lose the spears as well. And with that, he can easily run rampant through the economy, and look how many people in this wood line. We'll see if Deimos is going to be in trouble there, as DauT doesn't quite spot it just yet. Instead, sticks on top of the military units and looks to aggress through. And he's splitting up to look for clues, and he's going to find a lot of clues to a big murder scene that he's about to take part in. And there really isn't enough room here to comparison everyone. It was a beaut, right? The way he drags him back. And Deimos, I don't know if that was auto-clicked or if he meant to chase him that far, but it definitely was his kryptonite.
And now the knights are just rampaging all the food eco here, so suddenly you're off from food, and it's gonna be more and more difficult to replenish those spearmen, get the upgrades, get some more knights going. Deimos is still scrambling to get some more barracks going, but as you said, the upgrades are so severely lacking, and DauT is already preparing the next step, so once he sees full spearmen, he can just start adding his own men-at-arms, but I'm not even sure if that's going to be needed, because he's just slaying villagers left and right.
Oh, I'm waiting to see if he does the critical detail. If DauT takes out this market, like, Deimos is done. He won't be able to trade. He won't be able to get the food to actually push out units. No matter how expensive it is, he won't be able to get it because he won't have a marketplace. For the moment, it's being left alone just because he wants to butcher more of these villages. More knights riding deeper into the economy lines around the Palace of Swabia. And Deimos is looking like a headless chicken. It's a never-ending slog of knights. There's already a keep dropped in the center, and DauT is dominant right now. And I just don't see how Deimos does this anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. He's down to 34 population with basically no villagers working. On the other side, DauT just keeps flooding in the cavalry, and there's just no sign of DauT slowing down. Whereas for Deimos, his entire eco has collapsed, so he can barely afford to make any more units. The next wave of DauT should be able to finish him off.
Yep. I mean, doesn't even need the next wave. These knights are so damn tanky, diving through the TC, getting tickled at all times by these tiny, puny arrows. DauT might just make this a 2-0. I think Deimos is all but done at this stage. You can see he's barely moving anymore. He's got 1 or 2 villages maximum outside of garrison, which means he has no economy and no way back into this. DauT is going to swiftly kick him out of the tournament 2-0.
Dominant performance by DauT, and I really felt that the moment we started to stabilize in that first game, DauT was just very, very dominant. So it started a little slow for DauT, but now he got warmed up, and this game was just an absolute clinic from him. He didn't waver after losing the relics to his opponent, and just ultimately capitalized on the fact that he had a slightly better eco balance and went to Imperial, and from that point on, it was pure technology advantage that he also translated into an eco advantage, of course, once you had the Palace of Swabia going, and he ends the game with 78 kills to 14 losses only.
That's a slightly impressive number, not too bad from him. I mean, the impressive part, and I really think this goes back to what we were talking about with the generation, because in fairness, DauT did get, you got the chef's kiss generation, if we're being realistic. You really saw it and how powerful it can be when you consider the fact that DauT dropped a stable, and his opponent didn't drop any military tool, right? His opponent rushed up, he got away with grabbing 3 of the relics, and despite all of that, DauT still cruises through to an Imperial Age timing ahead of Deimos. And Deimos, despite the edge he would have got from the initial prelates gathering up the relics, it never felt like it was converted into enough knights. I think that really comes back to that food situation. You made a fantastic point around the fact that DauT had essentially, like, he crashed the market, right? He'd bought up so much food, he stockpiled it under his house in case a cold winter came, and Deimos was just sitting there going, please, sir, please. It's like, what you got to trade? 200 gold. I'll give you 80 food. What? No, I'm afraid that's the going rate right now, mate. And all because DauT had the foresight to understand that Deimos has stretched himself thin on the food, and his generation wasn't favorable for him to push through. And the other detail you mentioned is the fact that he never got on that deer early on. And in fairness, I understand why he didn't. Right? It was a really crappy generation for the blue HRE player here. There was no way he could easily justify dropping an Archon Chapel to have the deer in range, because that would mean sacrificing both the gold and his wood line.